This is the Engwe Engine X. This is the EU version. So it's locked to 15.5 miles an hour and it has a 4 mile per hour throttle. And you've seen my review before that I did about a year ago of this. But things have come on now. It's EU legal. And I've got a rear battery. The one that Engwe makes. So I've thrown that on the back. So we're testing that at the same time because that gives us all that extra range. It's still a good looking bike. And the Engwe Engine X was always one of my favourite bikes. But with the speed now being limited, I wonder what sort of range you're going to get from that rear battery. And how well it works on the hills. So anyway, let's do the hill climb. So let's see how it does on the hill climb. As we know, it's 112 feet over a third of a mile climb. The great thing about this being a cadence sensor, although we all know I prefer a torque sensor, is that it gives you all the power at once. So you're never really going to struggle once it kicks into gear. And in its highest gear you can get it moving at most hills, but at the moment I'm definitely not putting any power into this. My legs are just moving around. So yeah, it's having no problems getting up here. Go up a couple of gears. As I always say, if it can't make it up this hill, it's not worth having. So, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the fact that this bike is locked and I can't find a way of unlocking it to 15.5 miles an hour. But it's easily made it up here. So it's at this point I'd like to talk about the throttle. The throttle gives you up to 4 miles an hour. And to be honest, unless you're on the flat, it's useless. So you're sort of restricted to using your gears, which it's nice. I've sort of come full circle and I'm sort of resigned to the speed limit we've got. But the amount of riding I do you know, I wish it was 17.5 miles an hour. 2.5 miles an hour more. It would just make you feel like you're getting a bit more out of the bike. But like I said, I don't mind it. I'd rather the bike was legal and it, you know, they can't take it off you. I like that. And as you can see, downhill, 24 miles an hour, no issues. 25. You know, it's annoyingly it is what it is. I would, like I said, I would like 17.5 miles an hour. And it's that half a bump, you know, between 15.5 and 20 miles an hour, which everybody seems to want. On average, 20 miles an hour would be nice, but you know, you're out for a leisurely ride. You don't want the police looking at you, and if they look at you and they pull you over, you don't want them taking your bike off you. So within that, you know, this gets extra props. Because unlike America, that has 3 different e-bike rules, 1, 2 and 3, for different speeds and different powers, you know, we're stuck with the one for now. I think we're going to be stuck with the one for a long time. So if you're getting into e-biking for the first time, this is a good bike to start with. It's fully legal. You know, it's not that laissez-faire thing, well, I'm not bothered about the police. Well, you kind of should be, because they are taking bikes off of people. And more to the point, they took one of these off of somebody because the throttle was working. Well, the throttle works on this one to 4 miles an hour. And like I said, I think it's just basically for when you're walking the bike around, because there's absolutely no torque in that 4 miles an hour. And ideally, we want torque. We're going to go up this horrible hill, because if you followed me before, you'll have seen me go up this hill. Let's get up this one. Not my favourite hill, but like I said, we've got a cadence sensor, so this isn't going to be difficult. It's slightly easier than coming up here using a torque sensor. So if you've got mobility issues, this is perfect. This is the thing you need. Let the cadence sensor do the work. So as we approach the traffic lights, obviously, you're going to be after getting in higher gears to get this thing going when, like now, but I can see things are moving. Drop the gears down. Whilst it's nice having a throttle, this still does the job well. You don't see me complaining really that much. Yep, made it up there, absolutely no problem. Like I said, unlike using a throttle, you have to get used to using the gears. And while the throttle's convenient, you can still get away with using the gears. I mentioned it before, the rear gear ratio might be okay for a 26-inch e-bike, but ultimately it doesn't work so well for 20-inch wheels. The geometry is all a bit wrong, but you know, it's like anything else, you sort of get used to it. Of late I've started getting used to that P275 Pro, the way that works. It's like anything else, it's what you're willing to get used to. And as you can see, I'm in 7th gear, I'm all out of breath, going uphill, 15.5 miles an hour, the bike's doing most of the work. I'm just doing the steering. So I'm at some lights on a hill, and this is an example of having to use your gears to get up the hill instead of a throttle. So I'll pull it into its 2nd highest gear, and we'll see how we get on here. And this will be an example of what you're involved with when you're going uphill. But again, that was a bit of a struggle. I mean, it got off. With a bit of practice, I'll be, you know, far better at it, because I'm not used to having to do it. But again, this springs back to the fact that if this was an 1134, I'd have better gearing range, and I'd have pissed that. But yeah, I mean, you're not always going to encounter lights on hills like that, but that's normally the lights in hill tests that I do in the centre of town with the bikes. I think it's a less steep hill there, so I'm going to have less problems when I get into town. But again, it's something you need to be aware of if you're thinking about getting a bike like this, that you've got no usable throttle, because that's what the EU and UK requires. The throttle you've got is basically a walking throttle for walking the bike, which is handy, but as for general riding, unless you're on the flat, it's pretty useless. It's only useful for what I've just mentioned. We're going to come down onto the bypass, and we know that we're not going to get up past 15.5 mile an hour once we're on it. And I don't recommend this unless you're using mirrors, because you have to think and look for everybody else around you, because they're not looking and thinking about you. They don't care about you. So just bear that in mind. So this ain't the busiest traffic, luckily. But, you know, we're doing 15.5 mile an hour. I could possibly get a bit more if I put some effort into it. But it seems to retard the speed when you're pedaling past 15.5 mile an hour. That's what I mean about people not caring about you, because they're just a bit simple. They don't care. You're always fighting for traffic, no matter whether it's here or you're fighting for traffic in the centre of town. You're always fighting for space. And that was just a prime example of it. So we're going to be coming up to one of my least favourite hills. I'm going to see if it can make it up that one. I think the old 15.5 mile an hour thing is suitable in some situations, but it restricts where you can take these bikes, to be honest. It really does restrict where you can take them. But it's nice, whatever gear I'm in, it gives me all the power if I'm turning my legs. At the moment, I'm in its 7th gear. And to get up this hill, I'm going to drop it down into 3rd in a moment. I was obviously in a rush. So we go down into 3rd here. I'm just turning my legs around. I'm not actually putting any inertia into these pedals. Might drop it actually to 4th. So now I can feel a little bit of pressure going into the pedals. And yeah, all good. Drop it into 3rd now. But it's having no problems getting up this hill. And more to the point, I'm having no problems getting up this hill. And these are the worst kind of hills anyway, because they've got bends in them. And as soon as you're turning into a hill, or doing turns on a hill, you're losing the inertia you've got in the pedals. That's why I don't like them. But yeah, made up there, no problem. If you have a look down now at my battery, it's saying 3 bars. It's just jumped from 5 to 3. And the reason for that is battery sag. But that'll pop its way back up shortly. And as you can see, we're back to 5 bars. That's battery sag for you. So let's go see what it's like through town. It's one of the best days we've had in ages. It's been a bit grotty lately, and all day yesterday it did nothing but rain up here, so... But I've got a week of nice weather, so it's giving me, well, apart from one day, it's giving me a chance to get 2 reviews done this week. I'm sort of starved for time because of my own work. Right, let's get into town. This bike, regardless of the fact that it's pretty much the same bike as the Pro, feels much nimbler. I think I mentioned this in my first review of this bike. It's just such a nimble little bike. It really is. I think it's partly why I like this design so much, that it's nimble. And I always go on about these bikes being nimble, and they are nimble. Tell you what ain't good on these though, the brakes are terrible. The brakes have no place on this bike, but we'll talk more about that when we get into the breakdown. Apart from the motor, this is a very quiet bike, very quiet. I don't remember it being this quiet. I also feel that they've changed the settings for the throttle to work with the cadence sensor better, because I feel that the cadence sensor it sort of cuts in sort of half the turn earlier than it used to. It used to take about 2 turns, and now it takes just one in a bit. And I think that's an improvement that needed to be had, especially with this freewheel ratio that they've used. The freewheel ratio that they've used on this ideally should have been 1134, but instead it's the cheapest common denominator that they put on the bike, really. And I get it. I know they've got to cut corners to keep the prices into within a certain bracket. Because an extra £10 here and an extra £10 there, they're losing customers, because it's odd how people's minds work. That they won't buy a bike because it's like, oh, it's £9 too much for me, or £10 too much for me. And all these 10 quids all add up. You know, this could have, if they'd have fitted all the right parts to this bike from the off, like hydraulic brakes and, a better, 8-speed, they'd have been pushing it into a budget that was probably £50, £60 more. And people's brains work like, well, that's £50 too much, or that's £40 too much, I'm not buying it. The great thing about these bikes is they're highly moddable. There's nothing rocket sciencey about these bikes whatsoever. I forever see people on the Facebook groups going on about, oh, mechanical brakes are fine, they do the job. They don't. They don't belong on a bike like this. Any bike over 20 kilos should not have mechanical brakes on. Really shouldn't. Pretty good on the grass too. It's, I say, it doesn't matter where you take it, it's nimble. And I like that. I like the fact that it's nimble. It's easy to get around on, the tyres are alright. Yeah, what's not to like about this bike? It's pretty cool. There's something about these bikes that become very, they become very intuitive, or you become intuitive with the bike. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. So if you're thinking of getting a DJI Neo, we're about to put it through a little test of our own, because I'm going into the woods and it's got absolutely no anti-avoidance. I'm still a bit torn about this 15.5 mile an hour thing. But like I said, if it stops you from having your bike taken off you, it's a good thing, right? And when you think about it, you know, you can cover 30 miles in a couple of hours on this, and you're not really putting the battery under any stress. And that's one of the things that the benefit of slowing this bike down is more battery range. And one of the advantages of that rear battery is you're no longer going to have range anxiety. That was the reason behind me building my 50 amp hour Engine X. It was range anxiety more than anything. I wanted to go places on it that, you know, 50, 60, 70 miles away. I think I did a bit of overkill with it, but ultimately it did the job. And that's what this range extender battery does. I mean, it's 26 amp hours, 48 volt in total, which falls slightly short of my 30 amp hour sort of minimum limit. But when you realise the power's been limited, you're going to get more range. And you can't not like that. And I think the price is quite reasonable, apart from one thing, which I'll explain when we get to the breakdown. It's just one of those budgetary things again, and I find it a bit mean. But it sort of might put some people off getting the second battery. Here we go, bit of familiarity. I mean, this is quite a steep hill as well, and look how easy it's getting up here. My legs are just turning around, I'm not pedalling. You know, there's no force from my feet going into these pedals whatsoever. And it gets up here easier than my Engine Pro 2.0 does, because I've de-throttled it. And because it's a torque sensor, like I said, it's something I prefer. Absolutely no issues with it whatsoever. So, yeah. It's nice not to have range anxiety. And like I said, that's the original 13 amp hour, 48 volt battery that just came with a bike. It was never enough. was nice. Let's go down by the canal. One of my favourite spots. Trying to work out what the grip's like with these tyres. They seem alright. It's not the first time I've had these tyres on a bike, and they work really well. And as you know, that's the spot that I tend to use to judge the grip. Look at that. Too nice a day not to be down here today, down on the canal. It's a cracking pub just over there. Really good pub. Nice for Sunday lunches, and well, nice pint of Guinness in there as well. I sometimes stop off for a pint of Guinness and a Sunday roast here. It's just the spot. Morning. Yeah, there it is there, look. You know, I'm so lucky to have this spot on my doorstep. It's about 4 miles from where I live. That I can just come down to and just... Well, a lot of towns and cities are on the canal network, so you can never really be too far. And if you're too far from a canal network, you're normally near the seaside. So it's... everybody wins, really. So yesterday I thought I had battery sag, but I didn't. Well, I did, but not to the extent that I thought I was going to get it. And I realised I hadn't switched the rear battery on. So when I switched the rear battery on this morning, I have 5 bars still left. And looking at this, 25 miles in, I'm still 5 bars. I said the range on this is going to be easily 50 miles, even with my weight at 240 pound with the pack now. Yes, I'm losing weight, but yeah, it's coming along nicely. That horizon looks fab. Just seems to go on forever. It doesn't, but like I said, it's just nice to be out. So let's talk about this little bike and how it's changed. Well, I've already mentioned that it's restricted now, but it really doesn't take that much away from the fun of owning the bike. It's still a cracking bike. And that range battery that goes on the back, that extra 13 amp hours, it's like a godsend. It means that really, you get, with the restricted speed on it, you're not going to burn through the battery very quickly, and you're going to get good range. And like I said, I'm 240 pound with my pack on, and like I said yesterday, I forgot to turn the battery on when I was filming, and today I'm back on 5 bars and it seems to be fine, and I've done like nearly 30 miles now and I'm still on 5 bars. And I haven't taken it easy because most of the time it's been in past 5. And it's gone up any hill I wanted it to go up. There's a few niggles, there's a few fleas on this bike, but value for money wise, which I think with the battery is going to come out at about 1400 quid. 26 amp hours, and you don't have to carry the rear battery all the time anyway. It's still good value for money, and it's still my favourite frame design. You know, it never, how can I pull it? It never really misses a beat. I know I have the problem I have with my original Pro, but they seem to have designed their way through that now. Engwe are going down the right route. They are doing their best for their customer base, which 2 years ago they weren't. But now they're learning by their mistakes because it's costing them sales, or it was costing them sales. They're making better products. I'm really excited to see this LE20 and get my hands on one. They're good enough to send me one to review. But yeah, let's talk about that battery. That came out 3 months after I put my battery on my Engine X, and I have 50 amp hours of range on that, and it did 100 miles quite easily, but I was carrying a very heavy battery. And then 3 months after that, Engwe came out with this for the Pro and the X. It can pretty much be finagled into pretty much any 48 volt bike, but here's the thing: you've got to be able to weld, you've got to be able to finagle this thing, and it's going to end up higher up than it is now. But yeah, it's worth having that extra 13 amp hours. It's like, it's more than double the range. The way the batteries sip through, it's probably the same as what it is on the usual adapter I use, the usual blender I use, and it sips from both batteries at the same time. So if it's doing that, you actually get more range. It's not a lot, but I think it was worked at about 10 to 15% more range. Like I said, I'm into about 30 miles, I'm still on 5 bars. And I'm not taking it easy on this bike. It's been up hills. I've barely been pedaling on it. You know, the only downside, and we'll go over this a bit more, is the 15.5 mile an hour restriction on it. And you kind of have to get used to that, not having any throttle. But you know, you argue that there's a 4 mile an hour throttle on there, but there's no torque in that 4 mile an hour. It just doesn't move the bike. It's basically warp mode. So it's not worth having, really. In fact, if I was keeping the bike, I'd take the throttle off it, because it's just not worth having. But it's still that great design. Some people will argue it's this, it's that, it's the other, and it's still a great design. You know, for a folding e-bike, and I know it weighs, I've got it in my TT before. I've got my Engine Pro, the first one I had, folded it up and got it in the back of that TT of mine. And it got in there. I had to get a mate to help me get it out when I got down the other end where I was taking it. But you can get them, they do fold up quite small. But I like it. And you kind of get used to, or enjoy using the gooseneck again rather than using BMX bars. It fits better. BMX bars you have to lean into. This is just like you hold your arms out and then you steer. And there's something to be said about that. I actually really like that. But yeah, I still love this little bike. And there's reasons now I love it more, and there's reasons now why I love it less, and we'll talk about that in the breakdown. Yeah, when I'm down here, I don't have a care in the world. I'm switched off. And it doesn't matter, especially on days like this when it's quiet. Yeah, I'm kind of the Douglas Adams school of deadlines, which was, said he used to wave at them as they went past. I think we live in that society where we need deadlines or nothing would get done. And I need deadlines because I'd definitely do nothing. Especially if I was coming down here every day. It's definitely living the dream. This is the world famous Warhorse Memorial at Featherstone. Now, I brought you here before, but it wasn't the best of weather. And I thought today would be an ideal day to come have another look at it. Because it's fantastic. It really is beautiful. Really well done. And if you don't know the story, I'll put a link in on the description or in the comments. But partly the reason I brought you here is I think this is a little Warhorse too. I really do. The fact that you can get so much range out of this now with that spare battery on the back. The fact that it's road legal. The fact that you don't have to tax it, insure it. You can go on some proper adventures with this. But yeah, I thought I'd show you around here while I was here. Because it's just such a spot. And it's very close to my heart, so if you ever get a chance to come here, come have a look, because it's an awesome thing. It really is something different. So we're on 44 miles. I'm seeing 3 bars now, which it's got to be another 25 miles in there, surely. It's got to be able to do 60, 70 miles. And like I said, I put absolutely zero effort into pedaling this bike. When you see my legs are just going, well, let's have a look. It's my legs just going round and round. That's all I'm doing. I'm not actually putting any power into this bike whatsoever. And the other thing, I've had it in pretty much past 5 wherever I've been riding it today, except for down by the canal. So within that, I could probably eke out another 10 miles or I'd have had it down in 3rd or something like that. In past 3. You just I don't know, I'm sort of dumbstruck at the sort of range I'm getting out of this. It's and again, I'm just about to come up a hill and I'm not going to be putting any effort in. All I might do is change the gear as I come up here. And this is quite a steep hill. Anybody that lives in Wakefield knows how steep this is. And I'm just turning my legs round. We just dropped down to 2 bars, but I think that's down to battery sag. But like I said, zero effort I've put into this bike. The idea was that to see if the controller burnt out, and it hasn't. I mean, it's had a hell of a journey today. Like I said, this is all off of one charge. said, in city traffic or town traffic, it's fine. But it's not going to be as easy to get on the train as the P20. But ultimately, shifts along nicely, 23 mile an hour. Anyway, let's head on home for the breakdown. So let's talk about the range. Just turned it off and on again, and I'm up to nearly 47 miles, and it's gone back to 4 bars, but I think if I started pedaling away, it dropped back down to 3. So before I start this review, I'm just going to say that 3 months after I put my extension battery on my Engine X, Engwe came out with an extension battery for the Engine X and the Engine Pro. And I was sort of like, well, it's only 13 amp hours. Mine's in total 50 amp hours, so it was double what Engwe was putting out. But having used this battery and the way they've now adjusted the controller, it's a better bike because it's lighter. I'm not carrying a lot of weight around, but it's enough range. Anyway, into the rest. So let's talk about the Engwe Engine X redo, because it's changed. And what I managed to get out of that little 18 amp controller was pretty amazing. I was really impressed with it. And let's start with the cons, because there's a few, and I just want to get those out of the way first. Mechanical brakes on a bike that weighs this much. There's no room for it whatsoever. The brakes, I'm going to admit this straight off the bat, and I mentioned it in the video, they're crap. They really aren't very good at all. But to swap them out, 40, 50 quid. So you can swap those out for hydraulics. Pretty easy job to do, and it's the first thing I'd do with this bike if I was keeping it. And it's one of the first jobs I did on my original X. And I'll put that review in the description. Secondly, that saddle. You know what I think about Engwe saddles. It's probably my weight, but my weight's going down. I might change my view on these saddles as I sort of go along. But the saddle's awful. The throttle, it's not worth having. I'd remove it. It's 4 mile an hour. It has no torque to it whatsoever. And it's just something the police will pull you over for. If they see you using a throttle or even attempting to use a throttle, the police are likely to pull you over. And you can argue the fact that, oh, well, they're not going to pull me over. Well, they don't until they do. And like I've already heard that you find one bored copper on a night that's got nothing better to do, sees you going along on your e-bike, and you can get your e-bike confiscated. And there's not a lot you can do about that after that. What other cons have we got? That mid suspension, you'd have thought they'd have updated it by now. And also the connector for the rear motor. But that's pretty much all the cons that I've got for this bike. So let's get on to the pros. Since they've restricted it to 15.5 mile an hour, you're obviously not sort of drawing as much juice from the battery. So the range has increased. And it's considerably increased, especially with my weight, 240 pound with my pack on. It moves quite well. They've also adjusted the controller to work with the cadence sensor. So whereas before I've mentioned this in the video, whereas before the cadence sensor used to take 1.5 to 2 turns to get the motors cut in, it's now just over about 1 and a bit. And it makes a difference. Which, that controller's brilliant. 18 amp hours. It's definitely been reprogrammed, obviously, to restrict it. But they have done a good job with the controller. The controller's a different animal to what it was in my original X. And it shows. So, what else do I like about it? It's comfortable. It's just as comfortable as I remember it being comfortable. And in the 50 miles that I've done on it, well, pretty much 50 miles, nothing's come loose. I think they cured that the same time they rejigged the Engwe Engine Pro, because I'm 200 odd miles on that now, and coming up to 250 miles on that, and nothing's come loose on that, which is a good thing. So let's get onto the rear rack battery, which is the real bit of magic of this bike. So as of yesterday, nearly 50 miles, and by the time I got home, switched it off and back on again, and yeah, it says 4 bars, but when I tested both batteries with the multimeter, they were both showing around about halfway, so I know they're sipping at the same time. But in real terms, that means this bike might be able to do 80, 90 miles. The last bar always falls off a cliff. So let's be conservative. Let's say 80 miles. 80 miles range. And at no point did I feel like I was struggling throughout the test that I did on it. Yeah, I basically didn't do any pedaling. The only time I turned it down from level 5 to level 3 was when I was on the Canal path. And it was the only time that I thought it was safe to turn it down to that, because you don't want to be speeding along at 15.5 miles an hour when there's people about on the pavement, which is basically what this is, but it's still a cycle path. That range really shocked me, and I'm still blown away by it now. It's just impressive. So what am I going to give it out of 10? Well, what you have to remember is I've been kind of spoilt by my Engine Pro 2.0, and I do prefer a torque sensor to a cadence sensor. But if you've got any sort of range of motion issues or anything else, and you just want to pedal and not do any work, this is the bike for you. So like I said, what you have to remember is all through that test, really put no effort into that. I've just been turning my legs around and not actually putting any force into the cadence sensor. So it's just been the bike and that range, for the fact that I put very little effort into it, is just unbelievable. So what do I think points wise out of 10? Well, because of the brakes and the saddle that drive me nuts, they really do. I don't like that tombstone. It could have been 8 speed. I don't like that tombstone gear adjuster. What else don't I like? That's about it. I also took the mud guards off. I don't like them. I don't think they make the bike look any better, and it's not the sort of thing you want to be riding around in deep rain anyway. So I removed the rear one and didn't put the front one on. I think they make the bike looks better for it. But the bike on its own, in comparison with, see, I've got to compare it to the Engine Pro 2.0, and I'm going to give it 9.2. Add that battery on the back, it's 9.4. If they supplied it with hydraulic brakes and 8 speed, it's a 9.5 out of 10. As it stands, the setup I used yesterday, it's 9.4 out of 10 all day long. And it's mainly down to that range. And you after a while, you sort of get used to doing the speed limit. It's fast enough. I mean, if you're going out for the day on it, it's just fast enough. It's brilliant. That's all you need for a day out, is 15.5 miles an hour. Put your pannier bag on, fill it with some sandwiches and some pop, and you're off for the day. That's one of the great, that's also one of the great things about that battery rack, is that I can still properly use a pannier bag, as with the ones that I've made. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it. The setup, like I said, 9.4 out of 10. Next one coming up is going to be my review of the X26, which, if you want one, you better grab one, because I think they're phasing them out, and they're the last of the mental e-bikes that you're going to see from Engwe. And I have to be honest with you, after riding it round for an hour or so, it is a mental case, but we'll get into that with the next video. Please subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. I'll leave you now with the link into the original review that I did for this bike. There'll also be the range extension that I did in the description links. yeah, till the next time.